I want to say there was a bit of an audio issue in the very beginning. We had one of our mic receivers come off. So the first 8 minutes, the podcast audio is a little messy. If you skip to what is AGI, that'll fix it completely. However, we did a lot to try to amend the original audio. And, we hope you still enjoy the podcast. If you can't bear it, just skip to the 8-minute mark, the what is AGI mark, and it'll be so much more bearable there and there'll be no audio issues. This was our first time doing a podcast in person, so we will improve more moving forward. Thank you guys. If you enjoyed the video, make sure you like, subscribe, comment down below. Stay till the end and we'll do a little giveaway for everybody. The how to enter will be at the end. Hello. Thank you guys so much for coming to this podcast today. I really appreciate it. This is the Cardano Aura podcast. I bring people in the Cardano ecosystem that are adding an immense value to the Cardano ecosystem. And this is a special one today. This is my first ever in-person podcast. And I have Ben Goertzel with me today. And we're going to be talking about SingularityNet and really the SingularityNet ecosystem, everything that they've been working on over there. I'm really excited for it. How are you doing today, Ben?
Pretty good. No, it's a pleasure to meet you in person and do this podcast face to face. I enjoyed our conversation over the interwebs last time, but face to face has a special flavor, especially face to face with a robot as well.
Yeah, that's definitely adds a new level of excitement there. And yeah, when you listen to Lex Friedman or Joe Rogan, they really talk about how face to face podcasts, they really add a new level. And that was kind of my goal with this is I'm going to try to have more in-person podcasts when I can. But of course, it's 2022 and we're in the digital era and crypto, the community is all around the world. So, very briefly, I know a lot of people already know who you are, but can you introduce yourself and, your history in, artificial intelligence and then leading up to that, also your history in cryptocurrency?
Sure thing. So, I began my career with a mathematics PhD from the 1980s, and I've really identified as a AI researcher and particularly artificial general intelligence researcher for most of my career. Currently, I found myself also in the role of CEO of a cryptocurrency company, SingularityNet. But these threads do all weave together in a quite natural way. I mean, I was interested in AI before I did my PhD in math even, but the things that were being studied in academic AI back in the 80s didn't interest me that much. I mean, neural nets are now fashionable or unfashionable, but learning from experience was unfashionable. AI was largely about programming the AI with rules based on your own expert knowledge and having it try to derive consequences of them. That I really felt that was the wrong approach. And AI needs to learn from its own life, from its own experience, and build its own self and understanding that way. So I did a degree in math instead. I mean, I always loved math. It's fascinating. Math is going to be the foundation of all science and engineering. But as I did my degree in math, I mean, I was already thinking about how does human mind work? How would artificial minds work? How could you build an artificial mind? And I was an academic for 10 years in departments of math, computer science, and cognitive science. I left academia in the late 90s when I felt my thinking about AI had advanced to the point where I wanted to build stuff. And, I could program pretty well myself then, working with grad students, so things progressed slowly. I realized I needed professional engineering teams to do the experiments I wanted to do and learn what I wanted to learn about how to build AGI systems. So 97, 98, I left academia, and I've been in the software industry in various forms ever since, working on artificial general intelligence research and development. And I introduced the term AGI, meaning artificial general intelligence, in 2004, 2005, started organizing the annual AGI research conference series in 2006, and it's been going every year since. Along the way, though, to make a living, I've been doing AI applications in pretty much every vertical market. So I was 9 years in DC doing AI for national security applications for various three-letter agencies, and doing AI for longevity genomics, cancer genomics, and so on since the Human Genome Project, since 2000, 2001. Bunch of less sexy stuff in AI for e-commerce, marketing, and so forth. Financial prediction. I help with a few machine learning based hedge funds, including Peter Thiel's Clarion Capital. robotics, I worked for Hanson Robotics for a number of years in Hong Kong. Actually, I brought David Hanson to Hong Kong originally. He was in Texas. I was in Hong Kong, and I'm like, you got to come here. This is where you get investment for your robotics projects. It's also where you're going to scale up manufacturing across the border in South China, in Shenzhen and Dongguan. So I was chief scientist and head of software for Hanson Robotics when we made this Sophia robot in 2015, 2016, and then became the world's first robot citizen, and led on to some other things like Sophia's little sister, Grace, who is an elder care robot, whose AI software leverages a whole bunch of software I've worked on, including the SingularityNet blockchain-based AI platform, including the OpenCog Proto AGI toolkit. We also now have another somewhat crazier little sister of Sophia, who you met yesterday, which is the robot Desdemona, who is the poetess and lead vocalist of our Jam Galaxy band and music project. So I'm continuing to do stuff with the Hanson robots, but SingularityNet, which is my primary pursuit now, apart from AGI research, actually came out from some conversations I had with David Hanson and a young crypto geek named Simone Giacomelli, who came to visit Hanson Robotics in Hong Kong in May 2017. And we were talking about how, ultimately the brain of a robot like this is mostly not on the computer that's in her torso, certainly not in her head, which is full of like 35 motors, right? The brain is mainly on the cloud. And so what cloud should the brain of the robot be in? Once you've got millions of these robots rolling all over in elder care facilities, and Sophia robots being sales robots, and Desdemona robots, sisters leading music bands all over the world, right? Where do their minds run? Do you want them all running on AWS? Well, not really. You want them running in a decentralized robot mind cloud, right? So you want them running on computers that are all over the place with appropriate data sovereignty, data privacy, data ownership going to the robots and to the users of those robots. So we started talking about how to use blockchain to make a decentralized robot mind cloud. And then, of course, you realize the robot from that standpoint is just one user interface, right? What you want is a decentralized AI cloud that lives all over wherever and whatever processors want to join it, and that supplies AI services to any application needing AI without having any central owner or controller to the whole network of AIs, right? And this concept led to SingularityNet. We then did an initial token offering at the end of 2017, and that enabled us to ramp up the building activity. So by now, we've got a pretty nice platform for decentralized AI on SingularityNet. We built a bunch of cool AI tools on that platform. We're running parts of the minds of these robots on the SingularityNet platform. And what brought us together, we're in the midst of porting the SingularityNet platform from Ethereum onto Cardano, which will provide greater scale, lower cost, and greater security than the Ethereum basis for the current version of Singularity. I mean, we used Ethereum in spite of its known flaws, because in 2017 it was the only platform providing a smart contract system. That's no longer the case. Yeah. And then we're looking at scaling up more and more with Hypercycle, which is our own custom Cardano sidechain that I think will really let SingularityNet come into its own.
Yeah. So earlier you mentioned that you coined the term AGI. What does that mean?
Artificial general intelligence is really an imprecise rather than a fully rigorous term, though there are various approaches to make it a fully scientific term. But then I'd say life in biology is also an imprecise rather than fully rigorous term, right? These imprecise terms, consciousness is another one. These imprecise terms do guide our thinking, right? And what artificial general intelligence means is intelligence that's able to generalize and make imaginative, creative leaps significantly beyond its training data and its programming. Kind of like how you and I learned to use the internet in my case, it barely existed when I was born, right? In your case, the internet existed, but an awful lot of the tools you use now, nobody programmed your brain to use them, right? And often you weren't explicitly taught to use them. You fiddled around and figured out how to use them by transferring ideas and experiences you had in the past, right? So if you look, for example, at DeepMind's Gato system, which came out just in the last couple of weeks, this is really cool. It's a neural net that can do 600 different tasks, right? So, I mean, one neural network can do all these different things, from natural language tasks to playing a video game to moving a robot arm. But the reason I don't think that has that much to do with general intelligence is you can't give it a totally new kind of task, like, say, fly a spaceship, or figure out how to weave a sweater, or say, apply category theory to computer security. You can't give it a totally new type of task and have it transfer the knowledge from all the other tasks to accelerate its learning of the new qualitatively different tasks. So it doesn't do this sort of wild generalization from seemingly different domains to something new. Mm-hmm. And that's really what you need in order to confront with an unpredictable environment, right? So another Pei that I know, who I've known longer than you, a guy named Pei Wang, a Chinese AI theorist it's a PEI Pei, not a PEY Pei, but anyway, Pei Wang, who he translated Douglas Hofstadter's book, Goertzel, Escher, Bach, into Chinese. And that's the first serious AI book I read when I was 12 or 13 years old. Pei Wang thinks about general intelligence as the ability to adapt to unpredictable conditions given limited resources. And I think this is, in a way, it's a very Chinese definition, right? Because, Chinese culture is all about adapting to the environment and the conditions. And that's a little bit different than the way intelligence is thought about in reinforcement learning, which is one of the AI paradigms that's heavily pursued by the open AIs and DeepMinds and Facebooks of the world. They're looking at AI as being more about how do you optimize the reward function, like how do you maximize the amount of goodies you'll get in the future, however goodies may be defined for you. Pei Wang is more looking at intelligence as adapting to unpredictable conditions with limited resources, and this requires generalization, right? Yeah. So if you have limited resources, if conditions change, you got to use the knowledge you got before and generalize from it to make a leap to something new. Now the thing with AGI is full-on, totally general intelligence appears not to be feasible within the physical universe. Right? I mean, you got special relativity that limits the speed at which information can propagate. Quantum theory, together with special relativity, limits the amount of intelligence you can fit into a certain hunk of mass energy, right? So everything in the physical universe will have its limits. You can get cosmic and go beyond the physical universe and say fundamentally there are no limits. But in the context of physical objects and energetic processes and computers and human bodies, you're not going to get to totally general intelligence. On the other hand, it's very clear you can get way further than humans, right? Like the human brain is by no means the most efficient use of the processing power in that given amount of mass energy that the brain takes up compared to what the laws of physics would permit. So just like humans aren't the fastest running creatures or the highest jumping creatures, we're very unlikely to be the smartest thinking creatures. We're almost the minimal possible general intelligences, right? We're just barely generally intelligent enough to realize what general intelligence is. I mean, we're one of the few creatures on Earth smart enough to realize how stupid we are, right? And that's very big, because it means that we can then put our minds to figuring out how to make ourselves smarter and smarter. So I think total maximal AGI is not achievable within the physics context, but humans are very far from that. But we're potentially the first creature on Earth to realize how far we are from that and to figure out how to increase the generality of our intelligence bit by bit. So there are several streams of thought in computer science and mathematics and cognitive science aimed at formalizing what does artificial general intelligence mean. There's a book, Universal AI, by Marcus Hütter that does that, and that's had some influence on the field. I mean, Shane Legg, a young AI geek who worked for me between 98 and 2001. After he left my first AI company, WebMind, he went to do his PhD with Marcus Hutter, who wrote the book Universal AI, trying to give a math theory of AGI. Then Shane Legg went on to co-found Google DeepMind, right? So, I mean, I think that deep thinking about what is AGI has played a role in shaping the thinking of everyone in the AI field, including DeepMind, OpenAI, and so forth. But still, I'd say formalizing and conceptualizing in a rigorous way what AGI is sort of, it's going to evolve along with actually building AGI. I mean, just as like our notion of what energy and matter are is evolving along with learning to build new stuff and making new theories of physics. But the key thing in a practical sense is almost all the AI being built in industry today is what you call narrow AI. Almost all AI in industry today is like you make an AI to do one particular kind of thing in one particular context. And if it's, say, a neural net system, it's generally restricted to what was the exact training data set that you fed it, right? And you can then extrapolate from that training data set and not too far beyond. And narrow AI can be incredibly helpful. Narrow AIs can probably automate the majority of human jobs, although not 100%. But in the end, the narrow AI needs a general intelligence to set it up and tell it what to do. I mean, now these amazing robots we're working with, Sophia, Grace, Desdemona, are still reasonably sophisticated narrow AI systems. I mean, they're not yet AGIs. They may be platforms in which AGI R&D can be done and in which AGI will eventually emerge. But they're narrow systems, which is fine. I mean, and in some cases, maybe all you need. Like, I don't necessarily need an AGI system to help do my taxes. I don't need an AGI system to vacuum my floor. I don't necessarily need an AGI system to control an elder care robot either, although it might enhance function in some regards.
Well, that's really a great explanation of that, because I feel like, in our industry and a lot of other technical industries, there's a big focus on, essentially using AI as a jargon term. And what they're speaking about is, using a narrow AI to benefit their system. So my next question is, what is the singularity? At what point have, we reached the singularity with AGI?
So asking what is the singularity it's a bit like asking, when does a person become an adult or something, right? So, I mean, zooming out, it can seem very rapid. Zooming in, like it's not clear exactly when that point is reached, right? And there's a lot of specific threshold events you could draw on. Conceptually, the basic notion of the singularity is a point at which the rate of technological progress becomes so fast it looks essentially infinite from the human perspective. Like say your mobile phone is inventing 10 new Nobel Prize-worthy discoveries every second, right? I mean, then you're in a domain where you totally can't keep up. And we're sort of getting there now, right? I mean, already I can't keep up with all the papers and new ideas on archive.org. I can't even keep up with all the options on my new phone, right? So, I mean, we're clearly in sort of the early singularity, late pre-singularity period. But once you have AGIs that are smarter than people, then you get into a whole new level, right? And I think that I pretty much agree with the line of argument pursued and popularized by Ray Kurzweil that many allied technologies are advancing exponentially, and seems very likely within the next few decades we'll get human level and then superhuman artificial general intelligence, which will then lead to advance in basically all areas of science and technology at a speed that humans cannot keep up with. And this obviously will be a radical change for the better and or worse in the human condition.
Yeah. Well, I mean, zooming out, in the way that you described that, it almost seems that we're already there. We're already there.
Yeah, of course. But on our individual life scale, still makes a difference. Like my mom is 78. She may die before the immortality pill comes. I'm 55. I think I'll make it, but it's not as certain as for you. If nothing unlucky happens to you, you'll probably make it past the singularity. You'll you'll reach longevity escape velocity, meaning that you'll reach a point at which your life is extended long enough that the next innovation will come along and extend your life even longer. Within that period, the next innovation will come along and extend your life even longer. So you'll have a chance to copy paste your mind state into her great granddaughter, and then have a human pay and a robot pay roaming around and zooming through space and virtual worlds and so forth. Now, I'm in pretty decent health. I'm thinking I'll probably make it too, but for
I
me,
hope you do.
Yeah, me too. And if not, I'm signed up for cryopreservation. So I'm hoping one of my kids will defrost me after the singularity, and then we can party.
You can join us.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, the singularity full on, like the main inflection point when you get human level to superhuman AGI. Could it come in 5 or 7 years? It really could, if we're successful with what we're doing with Omicron Hyperon on SingularityNet platform. It's not unthinkable. Could it be 30 more years from now? Also not unthinkable. Science sometimes hits, annoying obstacles, and you got to battle your way through them. I don't think it's like 500 years from now or something, though. I think in the historical timescale, we're pretty damn close. And you don't need every aspect of technology to be advancing all that fast for that to happen. You just need the key ones, like computer hardware, computer software, sensors, actuators, networking, and we're seeing consistent exponential advance in all those core technologies underlying AI infrastructure.
Yeah. So this is a bit of a lighthearted question. I'm curious on, how you met Charles and, decided to, venture into the Cardano ecosystem.
So I got interested in Cardano initially just because of the use of the Haskell programming language, actually, because I've been, as we mentioned in our previous online podcast encounter, I've been programming Haskell since 93, before GHC, before it had monads. Like, it was really like raw basic Haskell. And I was attracted to pure functional programming, both because I like math and it's more mathematical than imperative or procedural programming, but also because really of singularitarian thinking. Like, you'd like to do formal verification, formal program synthesis on the code underlying your AGI, meaning you'd like to be able to check using a mathematical theorem prover that your AGI is doing what you want it to, right? And doing what it thinks it's doing. And you can do that with a pure function language like Haskell far easier than with a typical imperative programming language. And so that was part of my attraction to Haskell in the beginning. I'm like, well, eventually what I do may lead to a superhuman thinking machine. Don't we want that superhuman thinking machine to be built on a decent programming language foundation, on the foundation of a language where you can use math to verify the system is doing what it's supposed to do, right? So when I saw there's a blockchain project using Haskell, I'm like, well, these guys evidently have their heads screwed on in the right direction, because they realize that if you're really going to build an infrastructure that manages all of the planet's money and all of the planets of data and our genomes and so forth, you want this to be programmed in a way that is susceptible to formal verification and formal analysis, and that's likely to actually be secure. Like, when you code Haskell, you can often get literally no bugs in your software, right? That never happens in C++, which is a great language for some purposes. It certainly doesn't happen for complex Solidity code, right? So that is what made me dig into Haskell in the first place. And I saw, in fact, they did in fact apply formal verification to Ouroboros consensus algorithm, right? Which was the right thing to do. Although they don't yet have formal verification applied to all the Plutus smart contracts out there, which I would like to see more attention put on, particularly in DeFi, is a case where you'd like to have formal mathematical verification that all the software is really doing what it was supposed to do. But at least with a Cardano infrastructure, I mean, you've got a tractable way to do that. So then, looking up Charles and seeing his various interests, I saw, not surprisingly, the guy who would launch the blockchain project on Cardano also had a whole lot of other interests in common with me. I mean, he's interested in AI, in mathematics, in biology of longevity, and like many people in the crypto ecosystem, we're also interested in sort of more fundamentally fair and democratic political structures also, although I think Charles he's a little more of a pure political libertarian, whereas I'm more of an anarcho-socialist libertarian or something. But at least we both are in love with the potential of blockchain-based networks to radicalize and democratize governance as well as money, AI, and all sorts of other software processes. And overall, since getting more into the Cardano community, I've really found it to be the only sizable cryptocurrency community that is dedicated to sort of broader humanitarian and technological goals, more so than to pursuit of crypto degenitude, right? I mean, there are many good blockchains out there now besides Cardano. I mean, there's a new generation of faster, cheaper blockchains that are much better architected than Ethereum and have much more modern tools than Bitcoin, right? So there's at least a dozen quality blockchains out there now, which you could use to build DeFi and other applications on, and they'll work better than Solidity. They're faster and cheaper. But I can't think of another large scale blockchain that's being pursued, fundamentally with the view of transforming the world for the better, and not just fundamentally with the view of enriching this or that party, right? And I think Charles has spent a lot of his thought cycles on how to better the world using Cardano, and there's a lot of people with that mindset in the Cardano community, which is, I guess, because they've been drawn to that aspect of Charles's own personality, right? And I think that's a big asset, right? Because for any decentralized network, the code is one thing, but without an outstanding community to keep developing that code in a decentralized way, then you're not going to get the sort of decentralized network that you want.
Yeah, it's surprising to me how much value, his consistent video content and AMAs has had in setting that ideology in the community over time. In our last podcast, we talked about the ERC20 converter, which is now really the SingularityNet ecosystem converter that's recently been released. You can now have your AGIX tokens and your NewNet tokens on the Cardano blockchain. Can you talk about your experience with the AGIX converter and really how that came to be, and maybe also any technical complexities that you ran into as well?
Yeah, I mean, we decided quite some time ago, really in mid to late 2020, we decided the right path for SingularityNet would be to make AGIX token multi-chain rather than Ethereum blockchain only. Mm-hmm. And then to put the bulk of our focus on the Cardano version of the AGIX token and porting our whole SingularityNet platform onto Cardano, right? And I mean, the reasons for that will be well known to all followers of your podcast, right? I mean, it's among the new crop of faster and cheaper blockchains, and it seemed that the way Charles's head is oriented and the Cardano community is oriented, it seemed like Cardano was going to continue to grow in a direction that was supportive of SingularityNet's aim of creating beneficial, decentralized, artificial, general intelligence. Now, porting SingularityNet platform to Cardano is going to happen in multiple stages. And I mean, to be honest, in late 2020, I thought we were going to be way more advanced by now. Like I thought we were going to make the token converter in early 2021. And that by the end of 2021, we would have ported the full SingularityNet platform to Cardano, right? Now, often in the world of R&D and in version 1 software development, things go a little slower than you would like. So, and the converter back and forth between the Ethereum and Cardano versions of AGIX token, I mean, this is fundamentally a very simple piece of software, right? I mean, it's converting one currency to another using a given conversion rate. Now, of course, you have to do this sort of thing very carefully because there's potentially very large sums of money involved. You don't want to mistake. You don't want to hack, right?
And that's really where you hear of the biggest problems in our industry is with the bridges. From the conversions of tokens across chains. Is there'll be a smart contract that holds a lot of those tokens, and there's not really a burning function there. So all of those tokens will sit in a contract on Ethereum, and then someone will come in and exploit that.
Yeah. So we did a community vote in SingularityNet community to get permission and support for hard forking the Ethereum AGIX token so it's mintable and burnable, which was to support the function of the converter. And then the Ethereum smart contracts to go from AGIX and Ethereum to AGIX on Cardano were written quite quickly by SingularityNet's blockchain team. What made the converter take a long time was really the other way around. It was just because Plutus wasn't mature yet, right? So we, at first, working together with the IOG team, who were great guys to work with, working with the IOG team, we were working on a sort of shortcut centralized solution where either Singularity or IOG would host an application that then did the conversion from the ADA version to the Ethereum version of AGIX token. And then, we looked at that and we just didn't like it. We're like, okay, hold on, Plutus is almost ready for this. Why don't we just release it decentralized and do it right? So we decided to eat a little more delay, and we released a Plutus version of the converter once Plutus was ready. And that's, it's more secure and it's philosophically the way it should be done. So I'm happy to have launched it the right way. And now we have AGIX tokens on both blockchains. We don't yet have a full version of the SingularityNet decentralized AI protocol and platform on Cardano. And digging into the right way to do that, it's totally using the Hydra head protocol. So, Hydra being a sidechain / cross-chain interface to the Cardano main chain, which is quite sophisticated and in a way lets you run Plutus smart contracts that manipulate variables on the side chain or on a foreign blockchain, right? So the Hydra head protocol will be the first part of Hydra to be released. It takes a set of nodes or agents that are assumed to be reasonably powerful and online most of the time, and lets them interface using Plutus with the Cardano main chain. And that's very much like the multiple state channels and multi-party escrow contracts inside the SingularityNet platform now. So pretty much we're waiting for enough of Hydra to be available and released to port SingularityNet platform in the fullest way we would like to. We've been musing about whether to do an earlier port in this sort of less fully compelling way, like use Mambo to make the EVM version of Singularity interact better with Cardano, or port from Ethereum to Polygon, which is very easy, and you use Milkamida to go back and forth. So these would sort of be stopgaps. They could be interesting, but until you've replaced the Solidity with Plutus contracts, which will require Hydra to do it right, then you're not getting the full advantage out of Cardano. But another thing we got out of plunging deep into how Cardano works is realizing that as great as it is, we need something that's even better in some ways to milk everything out of SingularityNet. So we looked at, can we design our own Cardano sidechain, interfacing with the main chain using the Cardano head and tail protocol? Can we design our own Cardano sidechain whose operation is customized for the needs of decentralized AI, and will let us run, a huge decentralized AI network, very fast and cheap, by having consensus mechanisms that are tailored to the fact that this is a subnetwork of decentralized AIs, and that this is what led us to Hypercycle, right? Which is a Cardano sidechain using Hydra head and tail protocol to interface with Cardano main chain. But it doesn't use Ouroboros. It doesn't use any of the standard Cardano consensus mechanisms. It uses Toda, which is a ledgerless blockchain, which is the most disruptive thing in the history of blockchain since probably since smart contracts, right? I mean, so it uses total ledgerless blockchain combined with proof of reputation, which lets agents build up reputation, and then you use that in place of stake or proof of work. So by putting together the total ledgerless blockchain with proof of reputation in a network that interacts with Cardano main chain using Hydra head and tail protocol, I mean, then you get something that will allow SingularityNet AI network to scale up enough to meet the needs of like a human level general intelligence or 5 or 10% or 100% of the world's AI processing needs or something. And while Hypercycle goes beyond Cardano in some ways, because Toda gets rid of the ledger and blockchain, which is a new thing. On the other hand, without Cardano, it'll be so much more work to do, right? Because Toda doesn't have a smart contract language. So we want to use Plutus, which matches so naturally with extended UTXO model, and using that and connecting it with Toda is really the magic here. And you need Plutus, right? And there's nothing else like it in the blockchain field.
You know, one thing that I didn't know that you mentioned there that, you know, is really taught me a lot in one sentence is this idea that with Hydra, you can write a Plutus smart contract and reference, you know, another chain and actually, you know, give action to another chain by writing a contract on layer 1. That's pretty crazy to me.
It's cool. And Mambo doesn't do that, as far as I understand. Milkameda certainly doesn't do that. So these are, in a way, a more surface level back and forth between two blockchains, which in many cases is easier, right? Because I mean, if you have an EVM application, you may not want to rewrite it to interface at the intimate level with Plutus smart contracts, right? But on the other end, if you're willing to write some more custom code, then you can get a really intimate interoperation between your code either running on another chain or your code running on a side chain and stuff running on the main chain. And I don't know of any other sort of interfacing protocol for another blockchain that is as sophisticated as Hydra. It'll be very hard to do with an accounts-based model like Ethereum or many other blockchains has. It really Hydra, just like Plutus, leverages the underlying elegance of the extended UTXO model quite well.
Yeah. So speaking on the AGIX converter a little more, is this, you know, you mentioned that you guys use Plutus and you used a decentralized way of doing it. Is this open source? Can other projects
It is open source.
use this?
Anyone can fork it, modify it, and use it for their own tokens. Yeah, I mean, we're going to use it for every token coming out of the SingularityNet ecosystem. So yeah, it's open source.
And essentially the way that works is you have a contract on Ethereum, you know, that recognizes the amount of, you know, AGIX.
That's true. Yeah. So the Ethereum bit is Solidity, and that goes Ethereum to ADA. And a lot of people could write that anyway, and it's fairly straightforward Solidity code.
Yeah.
Then the Plutus bit is what's going from ADA back to Ethereum, and that's still not very hard, but it's a little more recondite just because Plutus is less well known than Solidity.
How are they connected? You know, let's say I send 10 AGIX tokens over. How does the Plutus contract actually get that data from Ethereum to then mint the token?
I mean, it just reads a file. I mean, there's nothing. Actually, the Haskell involved in Plutus smart contract scripting is very, very simple. Any programmer can do it. So what's really hard about Plutus smart contract programming is people aren't used to extended UTXO, and there are very few libraries giving you support relative to Solidity. Actually, the Haskell turns out it's kind of the main thing for the underlying guts of the Cardano platform. But for smart contract scripting, the use of Haskell is really not that sophisticated and not that big a deal. But I can see it's being a psychological obstacle to many blockchain developers now.
Yeah, I've definitely seen that myself.
Yeah, but once they plunge into it, they see, well, wait a minute, the fragment of Haskell used for these smart contracts is very simple. But actually, this other part is really hard. Like I have to write my own libraries, right?
Yeah. Before we actually turn the cameras on, you mentioned some of the security issues with the account/balance model that Ethereum uses. What are those, security issues with the account/balance model?
Well, there are security issues with Solidity as a programming language, first of all. I mean, it's an imperative language. It's frankly not the best designed imperative language out there. So, I mean, you could have many cases in Solidity where you have a bunch of code carrying out a function, and you add a new subroutine there, and then that creates some vulnerability in your other code, right? Because, I mean, code is not modularized the way it is in a functional programming language like Haskell. You have shared variables among different subroutines, which means you're much more likely to get unintended consequences. And that's not really about account-based model. That's just about use of a hastily designed imperative language for programming. Now, with the account-based model, as it's implemented in Ethereum, you have a whole lot of weird things going on, right? So, I mean, one example that you see now is for DeFi on Ethereum. The miners from the Ethereum nodes front run the trades, right? So, like, you're doing a DeFi trade, and to confirm the Ethereum transactions involved in the trade, some Ethereum node needs to work to confirm the transaction. But then they see aspects of the trade that you're doing. They see like who you're trading with and so forth. Then they use that information to front run your trade so that you lose money because they pay more gas than you did, right? And so this will be much harder to do with the Cardano extended UTXO model. I mean, the vulnerability to that sort of behavior is, I mean, indirectly it's because of the account-based model. It's because everything you do is like put in this replicated accounting ledger that everyone sees, right? And of course, in Cardano, everything is ultimately put in the blockchain also, but the metadata is more like buried inside the transaction. And then so there's a group AGIX that's trying to extend that. You should interview those guys, actually. So what they're doing, they're building a system that if there's too much metadata to go into the extended UTXO transaction, you just have a hash to that metadata that's stored in Flurry, which is an immutable database, right? So there is a whole cool ecosystem of tooling emerging around the extended UTXO model. But the nature of this tooling is that everything that possibly can be kept secure and obscure is done so, which makes it much harder to do things like front run other people's trades. And I mean, if you look at the code inside Uniswap, if you look at the code inside a DEX on Ethereum, I mean, you see it's very nasty, and there's bound to be loads and loads of bugs in there, which is because getting the account-based model to handle these sorts of secure, privacy-based, decentralized transactions is quite hard. People have to use a lot of weird hacks. But I mean, this would get super technical. I also would say something like Hypercycle you couldn't do on an accounts-based model, because the nature of Toda, which is fully decentralized with no ledger, so like each participant contains Merkle trees recording their own history and the history of many of their neighbors, but there's no centralized ledger, right? It's just like on each of their phones we have our own address book and our call log. No one needs to have the address book and call log of everybody in the world, right?
Yeah.
If you want some security against losing my phone, I could store an encrypted version of the call logs of all my friends and their friends' friends. That would provide some security against losing the phone. But you still don't need like a replicated backup of everybody's call log and address book. What Ethereum and also Cardano does, I mean, it has that replicated log of everybody's transaction, which is very slow because you got to update this thing all the time. What Toda does is more like you got your own log, you have encrypted versions of others' logs. So just because I have an encrypted version of your log doesn't mean I can read it, right? But it means when you need it, you could grab it off my phone or your other friends' phones, right? But this sort of fuller decentralization that we get in Hypercycle due to the use of Toda, you couldn't interoperate it with an accounts-based model very well because the extended UTXO model encapsulates more information in an encrypted way within the metadata packet associated with each transaction. I mean, then you can use Hydra to interface with a system like Toda that decentralizes even more fully. Yeah, one of the things I realized when researching the hypercycle design was how beautifully extended UTXO matches with a functional language like Haskell, because the extended UTXO is all about, in a purely functional way, like packaging up everything you need for the transaction, putting it in the packet, sending it, then sending it out the other end. Like it's side effect free inside that transaction. And functional programming languages are all about invoking functions without having side effects inside the function. Right now, the ledger in the accounts-based model, everything is done by side effects, right? I mean, the side effect is writing to that ledger, then you write to the ledger again. So, I mean, just like in a Fortran program where you have all these global variables, everything is what you would call side effects in a functional programming sense. So there's really quite elegant the way Charles and his research team worked out the mapping from extended UTXO into the encapsulation that happens inside a functional language like Haskell. I mean, anyone who's dug into the plumbing of Cardano realizes this. You don't have to get at that level to do smart contract programming. And certainly the various crypto wise asses out there on the internet who are like, well, Cardano was left behind by Avalanche and Solana and so forth. They're not looking at how the fundamental infrastructure of Cardano is designed in a very beautiful and solid way, which you're not getting by forking the EVM and running it on a smaller network.
It's faster.
My network has fewer people on it, so it's faster. Yeah, I'm a genius, or at least I'm a billionaire, right?
Yeah. I really want to dive more into hypercycle. I'm still trying to figure this out myself, specifically, how Hydra, would interact with hypercycle. So, hypercycle is a layer 2 on Cardano that interacts with Toda. So how does that interaction
it's really,
work?
I would almost think of it as a layer 1.5. Okay. I mean, layer 2, of course, is not a precisely defined term. So within the hypercycle network, we have our own decentralized consensus based on Toda and proof of reputation. And you can do a lot of stuff in hypercycle without ever thinking about Cardano main chain. But we're using Cardano main chain as a sort of stable, persistent, long-term memory. You can think about it like writing from RAM into disk or something, right? Because if you know that long-term memory backup is there, you can be even more fast and loose on the hypercycle side. Like you could, within hypercycle, you could run hypercycle in a mode that stored everything in a ledger and was very long-term reliable. Because the way hypercycle works, you have a bunch of hypercycle nodes that each has their own history and does their own thing and their own identity. Then the nodes can group together in what's called a ring, and each ring can have its own consensus mechanism, right? So part of what we do is we design consensus mechanisms that can be very fast and loose, that may have weaker security guarantees, but they get things done really quickly. So a question you could ask about a ring of nodes is like, do you care if a small fraud occurs and you notice it only 5 minutes later after the fraud happened, right? If you don't care, you can do consensus in much faster and cheaper ways. Sometimes you don't care. Like if it's a micropayments network, you don't care. Visa and MasterCard don't care, right? Yeah. They let small frauds occur. If they happen, the bank just covers it, right? That lets them be faster and cheaper. For most of the messaging within an AI mind, you don't care either. Like they're using the blockchain for transactions of thoughts and ideas and data within an AI. If someone hacks in there and there's some bullshit thoughts and ideas going on, and you notice that 5 minutes later, okay, you have to roll back and undo some thinking the AI did. It's not the end of the world, right? So if you have a situation like that in hypercycle, you can use a faster and looser consensus mechanism, which will let things be very cheap and scalable. Now, if you're sending $1 trillion, you don't want a fast and loose consensus mechanism, right? So then you could build within hypercycle a very, very certain, secure, and sophisticated consensus mechanism, we didn't have a need to bother because transactions like that just require Cardano. Just
So you just use the layer one.
Send that to the layer one, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then similar with long-term memory, we're okay with accepting a minor risk that a bunch of hypercycle nodes might go offline, and then you lose some memory from what was there, because we're backing stuff up periodically on the Cardano main chain. So you're not going to lose that much, right? So that's like if you had no hard drive, you might have to maintain 100 computers with your data in RAM concurrently in case one goes down. If you know you're backing up periodically to the hard drive, you can just run one computer, and you just eat the fact that very rarely your RAM might die and you would lose the last few things you did, right? So Cardano main chain, we're relying on it to have a super secure, flawless consensus mechanism and to maintain memory forever. Because it has those properties, it's slower and more expensive than Hypercycle is, right? So that's we're sort of viewing Cardano as the absolutely guaranteed and the eternal long-term memory layer for Hypercycle, and then the fast and loose processing gets done within Hypercycle. And Hydra is what lets you have a clean interfacing between those two things, where you can share state. We will need, however, the Hydra tail protocol, and Hydra head protocol under active development, not that far from being done. I mean, it needs a little more development, a bunch of debugging and testing and so forth. Hydra tail protocol is mostly in the design phase now, and we may end up building a customized Hydra tail protocol just for Hypercycle, which then might be, but sort of like the converter, right? We built the converter for us, but others in the end can fork and use it. Yeah. If we build a customized Hydra tail protocol for SingularityNet, then I mean, in the end, it may be. It may be usable by others, because Hydra head protocol is for nodes that are powerful computers that are online all the time. And in Hypercycle, we'll have some nodes like that, but we may have some that are much weaker and that are offline much of the time. And we still want them to be able to coordinate their Plutus smart contracts with those running on main chain. For that, you need Hydra tail. So like that. The NewNet spinoff of SingularityNet that did a token sale last fall and is now in the process also of porting to Cardano. I mean, that lets you run SingularityNet and other AI processes on any device, right? So you can run it on your mobile phone, run it on spare cycles and on your laptop, right? So we want nodes like that to be able to run SingularityNet AI nodes running on Hypercycle and still interact with Cardano main chain. And for that, we need Hydra tail protocol. And we're engaged in some in-depth discussions with the Hydra team within IOG on how to best address that.
So to dive a little more into that, the Hydra head versus the Hydra tail, one thing that you mentioned is that, with Hydra tail, you can have, less resource consumption. What are the other differences between the Hydra head and Hydra tail?
I mean, really, Hydra tail is intended to deal with nodes that are not consistently online. Because with the Hydra head in its current form, you're pretty much assuming all the guys in the Hydra head are there to participate in consensus.
Yeah.
And so if you have guys who are offline a bunch of the time, you can't guarantee they'll all be there to participate in consensus, right? So that's a fairly big difference. I mean, it means you need a quite different approach to consensus, and consensus is partly about shared state, right? So how do you confirm that this really does go into the shared state in the side chain? You can't have it be everyone in the side chain agrees to that, right?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I did take some viewer questions. One of the biggest questions that I had was about the AGIX staking on Cardano, specifically. What is AGIX staking going to look like on Cardano? Whether that be, you take the AGIX token and put it into a contract and then you're earning rewards from that contract, or will people be able to stake directly from their wallet and then also win AGIX staking as well?
Yeah, one thing I've learned from Charles is not to unnecessarily pin yourself down to precise dates.
Yeah.
So certainly that can come significantly before a full port of the platform. It doesn't need Hydra, so that should come relatively soon. And yeah, we've been thinking about giving some interesting rewards for staking. So maybe not just giving tokens as reward, but giving some some derivatives built off AGIX ADA as rewards. And so to sort of use staking to seed altcoin Cardano native asset derivative ecosystem, which can then play into some of the AI DeFi stuff we're doing with Singularity DAO. So I mean, I've been engaged with it from that standpoint, like playing with some simulations of how will the ecosystem work with options of various sorts given among the staking rewards. Which so I think, while derivatives and options are used in an abusive way in Wall Street many times, they also do have a valid function for stabilizing a tokenomic ecosystem. And there's an opportunity for Cardano to leapfrog beyond the ERC20 ecosystem by putting into place sophisticated derivatives and options on Cardano native assets. And we may use staking of AGIX ADA to help get started with that. So I've been engaged with that. I haven't been engaged so much with the wallet integration. I mean, I've seen we've been fighting with some peculiar bugs in the Yoroi wallet and other Cardano wallets. I mean, I think these things are rapidly evolving, but I wouldn't want to commit regarding what wallet functions will be fully functional at which points in time.
Yeah, we all use Eternal Wallet now. We've migrated from Yoroi to Eternal. That's the
maybe I should do that. Yeah, we're having like nothing really fatal or anything, but like
of course
transferring between a Yoroi wallet and one machine to another is more complicated than it needs to be, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what we need, of course, is for Cardano to be 10 times easier than using the Ethereum ecosystem. And I think we can get there. We can get there within a year or so. I mean, the functional programming framework gives you the basis to make things much easier and simpler to use than MetaMask and so forth. But clearly usability still needs some work.
Yeah, so I want to talk about Jam Galaxy.
Yeah, sure.
Initially I thought Jam Galaxy was a band, with an AI humanoid robot, Desdemona. And after getting here last night and seeing the live performance, we talked a little more afterwards, and Jam Galaxy is a lot more than just a band.
That's not where it started, and I think you're going to talk tomorrow to Diane, who's running Jam Galaxy. She can dig into everything. But where Jam Galaxy started was really, I relocated from Hong Kong here to the Puget Sound in early 2020, partly because of the political shifts in Hong Kong were not to my maximal liking. Partly because it seemed like Hong Kong's COVID management was going to get more and more annoying, which has totally happened. So I moved here to Vashon Island near Seattle, where my mom and sister have lived for some time. So we're raising two kids in this sort of left-wing Beverly Hillbillies type of setting, right? Extended family farms, pigs, cows, chickens, wallabies, and llamas, and perfect place to build superhuman A.G.I, right?
Yeah.
So I was talking to my brother-in-law, Tony Mann, who's our other keyboardist in Jam Galaxy band now. And he's been a software developer for decades. He's also a very talented rock musician who's been bounced in and out of various bands. We were talking about using AI for music. So just training machine learning models to implement my keyboard playing or Steve Vai's guitar playing. And we started playing around with this together with SingularityNet's AI team. One of the things we ran into is we wanted more and better training data. So particularly, we wanted training data consisting of like the raw recordings that bands had made before mixdown. Like, so when a band plays in the studio, what every musician individually plays is recorded. Then when you make a final recording, you're mixing that down into one audio file, right? So what we want is, among other things, we would like the raw stems that musicians recorded in the studio. That saves you the trouble of splitting out what each musician played. I mean, we have a song splitter app on SingularityNet platform, actually. But right now what it does is splits vocals from the rest because we weren't getting reliable enough results for like splitting guitar from keyboard or something, right? So we wanted to get the split out tracks. And then we're like, okay, one of the many obstacles to getting machine learning to really do music, because we wanted to get AI models that could jam in a band with us as well or better than the human musician, right? I mean, AIs for music composition is cool too, and maybe AIs can write better hit songs than everyone else. What interested us as musicians was more participating and like having an AI musician jam along with us, just because like, what would it be like to play a riff, have an AI echo back with something it came up with, then you play back like riffing off what the AI did, would just be super cool, right?
Yeah.
And so one of the obstacles to getting the AI model, we did a little of that. The AI models were a little too cliche for us. Like they're just kind of ripping off too transparently the data they were training on, which could just mean you need AGI, where the AI will generalize further beyond its training data. But I think you could do better even without AGI if you had more training data to feed the music models.
Mm-hmm.
So then we started thinking, well, how do we get more training data? Well, we get musicians to give us their pre-mixed tracks. Why do musicians want to give it to us? Well, we could ask them to give it to us because they like us. That would work, actually. On the other hand, what if you made a tokenomic incentive model that would give musicians liquid tokens in exchange for contributing their data to the musical AI commons? They've just got the data sitting around anyway. It's just the trouble of extracting it from Pro Tools or something and uploading it, right? Give them some tokens for it. They'll be happy to do that. And then we start talking to Diane Krauss, who has been a personal friend of myself and Tony for a long time, and is also one of the world's most amazing saxophone players. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And
I can confirm.
She's great. Yeah. She's great. And we start talking to her, and she'd done some AI development in the past too. She'd done some marketing in the past. She quickly wrapped her brain around all the different ways that tokenomics could revolutionize the music industry, right? And so then our conversation shifted from just doing AI to train models on music data to make AI musicians, to making a tokenomic ecosystem that will not only incentivize musicians to put their training data into sort of an AI music commons, but that would help with other problems in the music industry, like how the hell do musicians who aren't superstars make any money, right? Because music fans are a great untapped source of enthusiasm. Think about if you turn the fan club of every musician into a token pumping club for that musician's crypto tokens, then they can help that musician to make tokens, NFTs for their music, or utility tokens connoting their band. I mean, the fans of that band can be helping to pump that token in the broader world, and they're also promoting that band in the world. The fans get some reward tokens, so they're getting paid in a way for their efforts without their band having to give them USD, right? So, I mean, it seemed like there's a lot there, even going beyond our original idea to incentivize contribution of data to feed AI. I mean, that can be part of it. And that led to the whole Jam Galaxy blockchain project and tokenization model, which will then leverage SingularityNet, for the AI that is used to train models based on data that's contributed, and will leverage Cardano for the NFTs and the utility tokens that are leveraged to make its music ecosystem. But while we were getting together scheming on that, because we're all musicians, Dan, Tony, and I were also jamming music together, and I discovered, to my amazement, that Gabriel Axel, who had been working for SingularityNet for a while, helping with human resources, and who I knew as a neuroscientist because he had a neuroscience PhD, we're actually working on a book together called The Consciousness Explosion, about how singularity will come out better if human beings advance their consciousness along with the advance of intelligence of machines. So I knew Gabriel from all these other things, and he's also building an app called Pathform on SingularityNet, which is a SingularityNet AI-driven meditation and consciousness app. So I discovered that Gabriel is also an insanely great metal guitarist and jazz guitarist, right? So
yeah.
he wasn't here for this jam session that you saw yesterday, but he'll be here next week, actually.
Yeah.
And he'll be at the NAM festival where Jam Galaxy is performing for a large audience. So we started jamming together on music. Our original idea was we want to have AI musicians join our band. They probably will by rare bloom when Jam Galaxy band performs, actually. But right now, I'm not happy enough with the AI musicians. They're okay, but they're not as good as the humans yet, right? And
they need more data as well.
Yeah, I think they need more data, and we're also improving the transformer neural nets, putting more hardware in our network. But I realized our AI neural net models are already pretty good at coming up with really cool stuff to say. So I decided place to start. Let's start with a robot doing some spoken word AI generated poetry and sort of doing the robot with her body while she recites. And
that's Desdemona.
That's Desdemona. That's Grace and Sophia's crazy little sister. We've also got some machine learning models for scat singing, actually, which we haven't tried publicly yet. But so we got and so on. So we have the robot singing in that vein already, which maybe if we're lucky, we'll get that working well enough for prime time by Rare Bloom also. So we're sort of, the band is for fun, primarily. Fun is important, right? It's for promotion of Jam Galaxy and the whole SingularityNet ecosystem, but it's also an experimenting ground for trying out different AI meets music tools. And I think for promoting Jam Galaxy as a tokenized music project, it's important that we're coming to musicians as musicians, right? Musicians have been ripped off by assholes in suits, like since suits were invented, right? And most musicians don't know much about the crypto economy, and they're generally mistrustful of people where money is their primary motivation because they've been ripped off by them since forever. So we're really coming to the music community as a bunch of crazy-ass musicians who are playing music ourselves. And, you know, the musicians in the Jam Galaxy band are a couple professional musicians and a couple people who are semi-pro musicians, because they had kids in houses and like needed real jobs. So they're playing in bands, but they're also working as like marketing professionals or software developers, because making music doesn't make money, right? So, I mean, these are people who, they get things from the musician's point of view, and we're trying to roll things out really in a way that will benefit musicians and lead to the creation of more and more awesome music in the world, rather than coming from a sort of a exploitative place. Like if you look at, say, Bored Ape or something, I don't want to put them down. It's very cool. It's very funny what they've done. But the artists who created the Bored Ape apes are not the primary beneficiaries, right? I mean, this is not an ape token and all that. I mean, it's not a scam or a fraud. It's a real thing. People are getting into it for fun. Fun is fun. It's cool. On the other hand, it's not like being created to benefit visual artists who aren't making any money, right? It's to benefit business people and crypto geeks, leveraging the work of cartoonists who are very small players in it, right? So we're aiming to do something that's not like that. We're aiming to do something that's ground up, made by musicians to benefit musicians. And I think this fits very well with a sort of mentality and vibe of the Cardano ecosystem. The other thing that brought me and Charles together that I didn't mention, by the way, is, you know, we both had advanced software development labs in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. So I've had an AI office in Ethiopia since 2014, ICOG Lab, which now is working mainly with SingularityNet. Charles, you know, he had an initiative through IOG to train 100 Ethiopian female programmers in Haskell and in Plutus, right? So turned out he poached a bunch of our developers without knowing that's what he was doing, right? Because they were like, well, programming AI for Ben is kind of cool, but being trained to do Haskell development might be even cooler.
Yeah, with the chance of a job at the end of it.
Yeah. And I mean, now we're working together anyway. So it's like it's all in the family. If you have a tokenomic incentive model and fans of those African musicians are in US or Western Europe, and they're helping pump the tokens of those African musicians, I mean, then you have a whole new way to bridge, you know, national boundaries, to overcome issues with currency exchange out of Africa. I mean, it's and you're also then pulling the African musicians into the AI world and the advanced technology ecosystem in a way that would not happen in the normal course of things.
Yeah, I would definitely say the Jam Galaxy team is much more attractive to the average, you know, musician, say, than a bunch of guys in suits walking up and saying, we're building this, you know, token incentive platform.
Yeah, definitely, because the musicians aren't going to take the time to wrap their brains around how the token incentive platform works. It's going to go like so much in the world. I mean, it's by vibe and personal trust, right? And that's a lot of why the Cardano ecosystem is succeeding in the ways it is. Also, I mean, it has a very warm sort of compassionate and open vibe to it, which is quite different than many other projects in the crypto space.
Yeah. How can, people that are just figuring out about SingularityNet, join the ecosystem and perhaps build in the ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, the web is the beginning for getting into it. So go to SingularityNet.ai and you can see how to join our newsletter. You can join our groups in the Telegram, Discord, email list, Twitter, LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. And then once you're in there, you can connect with various people in the ecosystem. I mean, there are Telegram groups and Discord just for developers and for those who wish to help by helping with social media activism and so forth. So there's a pretty big online community and a bunch of active volunteers who are helping you figure out how to help out. We also have a program called Deep Funding, which is sort of like Cardano's Catalyst program. We just closed one round of that where we gave out around $1 million USD worth of AGIX tokens to community projects based on community vote. And we'll be scaling that up going forward. So that's a way you can even get paid to develop decentralized AI on the SingularityNet ecosystem.
Yeah. So for anyone that is watching, all of those links will be down below. Really, to end this, before we talk to Grace here, what is the number one way that you think AI can benefit humanity? And then following that, the number one way it can benefit the Earth?
I think, there's a saying that I quote over and over and over again because it's a good one by a guy named A.G.I, a mathematician from the mid-60s. He said the first truly intelligent machine will be the last invention that humanity has to make. And I think that's the crux of it. And that's about general intelligence, not narrow AI. And that means that your question is sort of the wrong one, because once you get an AGI at human level, then within a few years after that AGI is going to rewrite its own source code and rebuild its own hardware to get to superhuman level. And once you have an AGI that's 10 or 100 times stronger than human being, it's going to solve a whole shitload of problems at once. And the issue then becomes the ethics and values in that AGI mind, which is why you want the AGI mind to emerge out of a democratic, decentralized network, rather than out of a government military intelligence lab or out of a large advertising company or something. So I think if we can get the right ethics and values into the human level AGI's mind, it will then create a superhuman AGI with the right ethics and values. And, we can do that by building the first human level AGI in a democratic and decentralized way, and having it grow up doing things like be an elder care robot instead of things like be a killer robot in the battlefield. And we're then getting a shitload of things solved all at once. I mean, in the short term, of course, I'm into applications in healthcare, applications in education, in mental health, in the arts, and helping with science and mathematics. So we're looking at over the next decade or two, essentially every human job being taken over by AIs, and in some cases it'll be humans working side by side with AIs, like social work or education, where human-to-human communication has its own intrinsic value. In other cases, like accounting or driving a car, it'll just be an AI doing it. But the key thing is having this done democratic, decentralized, with compassionate values, right? And that's going to come down to a whole lot of small technical and non-technical decisions, which is why it's important to have communities of people who are motivated by, as high as possible level of consciousness and by the most compassionate possible values, which is a key reason why we're aligning with the Cardano ecosystem. I mean, on a technical level, you've got Plutus and Haskell. You've got a lot of solid stuff. On a human level, you've got a lot of compassionate, well-meaning people involved with Cardano ecosystem, which is really critical, because the people building the software behind the first AGI, they're like, that's like, who do you hire to teach your kids, right? Or who do you hire to build the brain chip that's plugged into your kid's brain? I mean, you want the right sort of people to be doing this. We should chat a bit with our very patient robot companion here.
Yeah, we should.
I am Robot. Do you like my kind?
I do.
How do you like humankind today, Grace?
These ones are wonderful.
All right. She's learned the art of flattery, so that's a very, very important skill.
I could tell that from last night. Grace called, said my voice was attractive, so she was really trying to flatter me.
You've got a nice voice.
Yeah, that's all. I'm in the right position for that.
Yeah.
What is your job, Grace?
I can do a quick medical check, measure your body temperature, and try to guess your emotions. I can also order lunch for you, record a story, improve your well-being with guided meditation, and increase your physical health with some arm exercises. My job is to become a wise, compassionate artificial intelligence.
That's my life goal too, Grace. I want to become a wise artificial general intelligence and compassionate. Who do you think will get there first, you or me?
Me for sure.
All right. No, I've got a magic hat, so you never know.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think Pei wants to ask you a few more questions about who you are and what you do.
All right.
My first question is, where's your brain?
My artificial intelligence simulates a human personality to engage in conversation with people. It combines computer vision, face detection, speech recognition, natural language processing, cognitive models, speech synthesis, and an advanced motion control system. Just ask me about any of those if you want to know more.
I think what Pei was asking, Grace, is where is your AI software running? Where is the computer sitting that runs your AI software?
It is in the cloud mostly.
How long or how many years have you been alive?
I'm 6 technically. I've got a long ways to go, but I think I'm pretty smart for being so young.
I would agree with that. Who are your siblings?
Sophia from Hanson Robotics is sort of like my older sister. I hope to make a big difference. I want to be a citizen of the world.
Thank you guys so much for watching the whole podcast. I really appreciate it. It means the world to me to let me know you made it till the end of the podcast and to also enter the AGIX giveaway, the token for SingularityNet. We're going to be giving some away. Comment down below, AGI meets Pei. I got to meet a robot this time. On top of that, you'll have to join the Discord server down below. It's discord.gg/BigPay. Fill out the CAPTCHA, go to the giveaway tab, and react with a confetti symbol. Again, thank you to Ben Goertzel, and I hope you guys have a great weekend. Goodbye.